Yes, you do.
I am
physically, maybe.
I am off.
No, he does.
I can't. Oh,
There it is.
Oh, we're coming in now. I'm a little bit quiet, maybe. Just gonna go over there.
My left is a lot quieter than my right. That's
Check.
not something to do about.
How was that?
Ow.
Wow.
My left is
So now
still left is way worse now.
that was good preparation for the gig tonight. I can't hear anything now. A little bit quiet for me, just a tiny bit.
He needs
Check,
earplugs.
check. 1, 2, 3. That's pretty good. Perfect. Thank you.
Your left.
Yeah.
You got right and left.
Yeah. My left is still quieter, but it's fine.
It might be the headphones.
Yeah, it's.
I can look into it.
Your left is the one that has tape on it.
Yeah, that does
Makes
explain it a lot, doesn't it?
Makes a lot of sense.
All right. Well, we are recording, so if you guys are ready to roll, then go for it.
So we're good to go?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay. I'm going to jump off with this one because this is just more or less hanging out.
Sure.
And we have our questions that we have to go over and so forth. But this this deadlift technique thing, it just won't die. Like every question that I get and every time I look up the trending, it's always about deadlift technique.
Sure.
And normally that's going to be supported with my view. Just don't deadlift, but not because of the reason I don't think you should deadlift, just because I hate it, because you're going to get hurt. So I have some interesting stats that I pulled up when I had John Rupo out last week, just in regards to injuries in training and as they relate to strongman, CrossFit, bodybuilding, and so forth. The first thing, because they'll say, because it's going to come up with the strongman as we talk about that.
Okay.
What I found was that, here we go. Where is my main notes? The main notes were 70%, just a little bit over, of all injuries in the gym that end up going to the emergency room are because of dropped weights, equipment malfunction, or miscellaneous.
Okay.
So essentially people just not putting their weights away.
Yeah.
Right? And everybody I know has dropped a weight on their foot and so forth. So I think that needs to be stated before somebody says deadlifting is going to get, you're going to get hurt deadlifting, or if you do strongman, you're going to get hurt.
Well, with deadlift, the weight's on the floor.
Well, just
already,
going in the gym. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
just going in the gym, you have that incident. And then, so that like washes out all of that. Then when we get down
That's at least
to
70% of the injuries washed away right away.
That's why you got to train at home.
Yes.
So
No one else can set you up to get guillotined by a 2.5 pound plate.
Anecdotally, I have statistics.
Yes.
I've gotten injured on squats and bench. I've never gotten injured on deadlift so far.
Okay, we'll see that. Anecdotally plays in very well. So that leaves 20% of the other injuries that would be soft tissue related or fatigue related or overtraining related, that falls in there. Now, when we look into powerlifting and we look at incidents per 1,000 hours,
Oh, I'm going to love
that's how they
this.
kind of do this.
Okay.
The powerlifting in general was 2 to 6 incidents per 1,000. I'm sorry, 2.6 to 3.7.
Per 1,000 hours of powerlifting.
Per 1,000 hours. Now, how you define the 1,000 hours?
Yeah,
of
this is what I'm wondering.
powerlifting?
So if you're a multiply powerlifter, how many reps get done in 1,000 hours of
Yes.
multiply versus
Yes.
CrossFit?
Yes.
Do we count the nap window in between the sets?
Well, you have to. It's
Well,
part
yeah,
of the
you
sport.
have to.
It's
You
part of
have to.
optimal performance. Anyway,
Yeah,
sorry.
so the prevalence of injury is 38.7% of the competitive, that was for bodybuilding. So powerlifting, the prevalence is 70 to 87% of the competitive. Now for bodybuilding, it's 0.24 for 1,000 hours and 38%, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Lighter loads. General fitness is 0.21 for 1,000, right? But they're going to make up the majority of the dropped weights on the foot and all the other kind of stuff.
Sure.
Olympic weightlifting was 2.4 to 3.3. The prevalence was, this is a weird stat. Keep in mind, I'm pulling from several GPTs, was 10.7 to 68. So we're just going to
Well, that's a
say,
big range.
we're going to say it's like 50 to 68. It's up there with the others.
I wonder if it's counting the weightlifters or the CrossFitters doing weightlifting.
Well, that's a separate one in here.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Strongman was one of the highest, 5.5 per 1,000 hours, 82% report injuries. And then the
can
CrossFit
see that.
was another odd one that went from like 1.2 to 18. So we'd just say like 15. But 4.2 per 1,000 hours is what it was, 27 to 50%. So Strongman kind of rank as the highest for this chart's kind of interesting here with the Strongman. Boom, right there.
There you are, Ilya.
That is
Sitting
Yes.
pretty.
that is us.
Yes. So I'm
we
gonna
are
s-
the biggest always.
Yeah, so you know, being that I hate the deadlift so much just because I don't like to do it, I'm going to say what exercise gets incorporated with both the most frequently. So it's all because of the deadlift is where I'm going to come out from.
Yeah.
Oh, just the deadlift. Yeah.
But to put this all in comparison, when we look at, I think football was 36%. Soccer was 16%. You know, so when you're talking total injuries per 1,000 hours, all these strength sports are extremely low
Sure.
in there. And
Well, with soccer, you have to count all the feigned injuries as well. You know, that would put it way higher.
exactly.
All the dives. Yeah.
Exactly. So I guess my roundabout point is not deadlifting because you're afraid that you're going to get hurt deadlifting is kind of ludicrous.
Well, it is, yeah. And
Yeah.
it's an interesting perception, isn't it? Because like you see the same with like youth athletes as well. It's like, do not get them in a gym doing anything. Like a 15-pound goblet squat is gonna like close their growth plates and injure them. But it's like, but they can sprint all day after school. Do you know what I mean? Look, like the shearing forces and all that going on with like a sprint or a jump is enormous. Whereas like a 50 or like a push-up is not okay. So I think we all have like these kind of underlying strange biases.
Of course we do.
But what I would say, I think should we say the risk for deadlift is that for me, it's kind of like running in that I think the reason a lot of people get injured running is because they just presume they can do it when they shouldn't presume that. Like their gait is terrible. They're probably maybe too heavy to start with, blah, blah, blah. They go straight on hard surfaces, all this type of, like the deadlift to many probably seems the most approachable because the bar is on the ground. We don't have to set up any equipment and all of us pick up stuff day to day. So they go in with the baseline assumption like, well, I can deadlift because I pick things up. That's one of the reasons why it's so functional and great to train it. But that also opens the door then to being the most naive about how it should be done and possibly being overconfident, which then leads to perhaps a higher proportional injury rate.
Well,
So
how many
from-
videos do you see of people posting online with their new PR and it's the worst deadlift you've ever seen?
Well, that's what I was going to say is, I mean, you cover the powerlifting, general fitness, you cover the strongman, you've been around this stuff your whole entire life, and MMA as well. You know, just this broad range and everybody's deadlifting. And for the most part, from what I've seen, most of what they're doing is right. Okay, technically. Half. Like half of what they're doing is right, but then when they look at the tutorials, they're going to try to fix everything to where they don't need to fix everything. They just need to fix the couple things that are really screwed up. What do you think those couple things are if we're going to go with a beginner? Just say a beginner. No, not I got to reframe that. To us, a beginner would be probably what an intermediate is to most other people.
True.
Not somebody just walking in the gym for the first time.
So someone's that's been at it for a year or two at the gym and is probably starting to be actually interested in lifting seriously.
Enough that they actually want to try to figure out how to deadlift better.
Yeah.
I think for me, there's two main factors that mean people probably need to be more cautious with their deadlift training. The first is that it's one of the very few lifts that you get rewarded with higher performance when you do it very badly. Like you pull a third attempt looking like a fishing rod, you maybe make a weight that you couldn't make with good alignment. Good is obviously subjective. And then the second one for me is that it's the one lift that isn't determined by your own proportions. What I mean is for you, for me, for you, for the basketball player who's 6'9" with the 7'2" wingspan, the bar is X number of inches off the ground for everyone. So if you're that person who's super tall with T-Rex arms, you have to deadlift if you're doing it from the floor. It's the same for you that it is for everyone else. Whereas like a back squat is going to be determined by your own anthropometry or whatever. So I think for that reason, we should maybe be a little bit more cautious in general when it comes to deadlifting. But I think the biggest thing that most people need to step back from when it comes to deadlifting is even intermediates, what we may be referring to as beginners, is very few people really actually know how to hip hinge, which is a pretty integral part of the deadlift. You know, the deadlift from the floor is a miniature squat followed by a Romanian deadlift. So it's a bit of knee extension and a pure hip hinge. And most people cannot Romanian deadlift well.
There's a lot of advanced lifters that can.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I would say is if you can't control, we're all probably going to agree that you should probably Romanian deadlift less weight than you full deadlift.
Sure.
So let's say you take a weight that's 60% of your 1 rep max actual deadlift. You should probably be able to hip hinge down from the top, which is easier than doing it from the bottom up, with that load extremely well. But most can't. So I think most probably need to step back from full range deadlifting if they're having technical issues or injury risks, niggles and stuff that are showing up, and actually learn how to hip hinge from the top down first. Learn how to control the eccentric, because what's the other thing that nobody does on the deadlift that we do to some degree on every other lift? We control the eccentric. Like, you don't just drop to the bottom of a squat or a heavy bench press, but on deadlift, we don't. So all of the benefits of the motor control, the motor learning, the tendon strengthening, all that type of thing we get from that eccentric phase, we just choose to ignore on deadlift. And there's a reinforcing factor where like, well, I don't do it because it's tiring and it's hard. Well, when you avoid something, it stays tiring and hard forever. And then you get to the point where your concentric strength, i.e. what you can lift off the floor versus what you can actually lower safely, there's this enormous discrepancy. Personally, I think that's where probably the higher injury risk of deadlift comes from relative to other lifts, because we don't do that. That's the one thing I would say that we just choose to completely ignore and not train with deadlift. So how do you do that? You go back and you do Zurcha good mornings, you do Romanian deadlifts, and you get strong on those. And if you get strong on those, your regular deadlift will go up, providing you're doing some kind of squatting or whatever and working on your quad strength. So that for me would be the main one.
Would it be safe to tell them to start with the bar, say 4 inches off the floor?
Yep.
So 2 blocks, stand up with it however they want, and then from that top position, hip hinge or Romanian deadlift it down with as much control as they can, and for a soft touch, and then just reverse it from there.
Yeah. So I mean, we're going to do a deadlift webinar in a couple of weeks. So this is great timing, right? So like the second phase of the deadlift, which is the hip dominant part on the way up, starts for most people like top of your shin, patella tendon, below your kneecap, right? If you can't Romanian deadlift well to that position, I would argue slightly lower, because we don't want to be on the extremes of range of motion, then you probably shouldn't be deadlifting from the floor, full stop. I mean,
so higher than mid shin. So this may be higher than 4 inches. I mean, 4 inches is kind of hard to.
Yeah, I mean, for him, it's going to be a different height for me, right? But you should be able to Romanian deadlift to the top of your shin, purely from hip hinging, with no change in alignment, with some kind of reasonable load, whatever reasonable load is for that person. Otherwise, I would argue about you deadlifting heavy from the floor, at least for now.
I would say if the demographic we're speaking about does that, that will solve 90% of all their technique problems, over time. They just need to commit to 3 months, 4 months of doing a block that way.
Yeah, for sure.
And then lowering it from there.
Yeah.
And then the injury thing's gone and the deadlift technique thing's gone, because we've all seen that people with the deadlift, because there's a lot to it. We have tutorials on the website for deadlift technique. For some people, there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
For other people, they just like bend over, pick it up, it's fine.
Sure.
Right? But most people are not. They fall somewhere in between.
Sure. And I think the other thing that maybe is unique to deadlift, which you don't have the option to do, is if you're really bad at hip hinging, you can pull sumo and have to hip hinge less and probably now move more load, which basically pushes the can further down the road and allows you to get away with probably higher training loads with the equally poor technique for longer, and then all these kind of problems probably just strike you, but later on and even worse. You know, like most people aren't going to say, oh well, my back squat sucks. Very few people will choose to half squat actively because they're avoiding getting better at squat, whereas a lot of people will go, conventionals never felt good for me, I'm going to go sumo, and yeah, the same loads and everything felt better. It's like, well, sure, because you're now moving them a third less distance or whatever, you know, whatever it might be, and you don't have to own that movement pattern that you're terrible at, which you probably should get good at.
Well, that's a key thing that we probably need to circle back just to reiterate, because I think this is really good advice, but if they just end up doing heavy block pulls with whatever form allows them to pull the most weight, which would most probably happen, then this is not going to work. It's going to make things absolutely worse.
Sure. And I would say that, you know, the caveat would be Romanian. This is why I like the Romanians, because if you round over like a fishing rod, it's really hard to reverse a Romanian deadlift.
Yeah.
A block pull you can get away with more because the bar is supported in the bottom position, but like if you were to do a Romanian deadlift slow, like with a pause in the bottom position, that's probably gonna weed out a lot of people overshooting the load or the reps, whatever it might be. The other thing that I like to do in that scenario would just be to do like make them do snatch grip. Like snatch grip sucks.
No, I think that's a good idea, though, because it's going to force load. Yeah.
So it's like, well, there you go. Now you can't put 4 plates per side or whatever. Like, use straps, that's fine. We don't want to be lifting like 25 pounds a side, but that's going to also give us a limiting factor, which is either probably going to be grip or upper back strength. So that's going to give, before we get too far into that fatigue of postural strength in terms of like the lower back or the hip hinge. So they probably have to end the set before it starts turning into the stuff we don't want to see.
Well, what actually feeds into that also is probably why people experience more issues and injuries on deadlift compared to the other lifts. The psychological factor of if you're doing a heavy squat or a heavy bench, you realize that the weight's on you, and if you're failing it, you're probably getting stabled by it, crushed by it, or whatever other iteration of that by it. With the deadlift's on the floor. Perceptually, it may seem safer, so people might try to push it faster sooner than they are actually able to push it. So because the thought is you can just drop it. What most people don't realize is failing a rep is significantly more taxing than doing a successful amount of reps, 2, 3, 4, 5 reps with that same weight that you could. So that also feeds into the injuries on deadlift significantly more.
So like when you're at a comp, for example, how often does the deadlift last?
Very rarely.
Right, so you have to do that earlier in the day. So knowing that, like the deadlift is probably the most taxing standard lift. I'm not going to say it's more taxing than a heavy yoke, because then you'll punch me, because it's very different, I'm aware. But let's say that in terms of a static lift, the deadlift is the most taxing. How do you have to approach that then, knowing that you have all of these things to come afterwards? Because like, yeah, you want to win, but it could be an AMRAP, it could be a max load, but like, you know that and I'm sure you both can espouse to this, like a 100% deadlift compared to a 96% deadlift.
So different.
Is like two different animals. Like the latter, you're doing the other events. And if the former, you're crawling through the other event. So how do you find that balance on comp day when there's a lot on the line, where you kind of have to judge, like, and yes, powerlifters have to do this, but we deadlift last. And sometimes we only deadlift once or twice.
Yeah,
like,
well, for powerlifters, it's a full
yeah,
send.
so like as a strongman, when
yeah.
it, you know, sometimes it might be the first event. How do you approach that?
Well, the last competition I did in Italy, that was a prime example where the deadlift was the second event. Pretty sure, yeah. And I got my 4 reps on it, whilst everyone else got 1 or 2 reps. And I could have gotten the 5th one. I started pulling it, and I felt that if I pulled the 5th rep, that would be that would be me done for the day. So I decided to just let it go there, and then I lost out on taking first place on the event due to that, because Ray O'Neill came in and got the last 5th rep. But it let me carry on in the competition and actually do a good performance the rest of the day, rather than my back and hips and everything being shot through.
Yeah.
So yeah, you pull back when you have to.
And have you ever made that mistake where you overshot that deadlift and then the rest of your events just, okay, there's a smirk there, okay, I'm not going to make you go and live your regrets there.
If we want to get deep in the weeds just with the powerlifting, it being last, if this happened to me a couple times, if it's an opener or maybe a second, and from the start you know you're not where you need to be, sometimes it's better just to let it go, and then not wear yourself out on the opener, which should be easy, but because you were too aroused or whatever it was, and the bar was too far forward or too far back or whatever it was, instead of straining through it and doing a stiff leg deadlift, which is going to absolutely crush whatever thought you had on the third, it's better just to we're deep in the weeds here.
Yeah.
It's better just to let go, but you need a lot of experience to be able to make that decision on that time. But that kind of does not as much as them, because on the other thing is you got placings too, and you may have two people in front of you that are pulling 150 pounds more than you know you're capable of. So then it's, well, I just need to pull whatever the minimum I have to pull to ensure that third place, and who gives a shit about the other 50 pounds when it can impact the next events that are coming up. So it's a strategic game too.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, you were just at CanFit, and it's a giant event for not strength coaches per se, but the fitness community, so forth.
The one thing I would say that maybe was surprising, but in a good way, was how broad the demographic was.
So with that, and we're still on the deadlift. How many in the demographic that would be coaches or trainers, which probably make up most of the people that were there or aspiring to be, are using the deadlift in their training protocols?
All of them.
Okay. All
So
right.
we did the powerlifting masterclass like we did at Swiss, right? Naomi and I got put on the bench, but we were all in close proximity, right? And yeah, they all deadlift, but most of them, and as we saw at Swiss, like there's a lot of people just assuming that they're doing it right. And I don't mean this in a derogatory sense in any way at all. But what I would say is, again, we're all falling foul of just because we can move from A to B with the weight, we assume we're doing it well. And this, for us, we were on the bench press. This manifested in people benching like out here. Everyone's out here, like elbows super flared, shoulders shrugged up. That includes, so I had 3 people who competed there was a powerlifting competition at CanFit Pro. They competed either that morning, which was interesting, because then they were in the afternoon, they were still vertical and talking, or they'd competed the previous day. They came in, I don't know what
And
the
for
level...
some reason, they still came in the next day.
Yeah, to do a powerlifting masterclass. I did question them on this, I assure you. And even the ones who competed were in the exact same camp. They may be a little bit better, but we're still talking about the same faults that everyone else did, right from... So this was great. So Ken was like, this is how it's going to run. Everyone's going to go up, lift the bar. You get assigned like a group of 5 or 6 people. You get 20 minutes with them, right? Go up, do the bar, let the coach watch you, do your first set, nothing will be said. And then after that, we want the coach to give you just 1 or 2 specific cues that help you, like are individualized to you, which was a great premise until they get on the bench or under the bar or lift from, and they're all doing the same things wrong. And for example, like I had a couple of competitors, Naomi had a couple of competitors, but then Naomi also had 2 people in her group, for example, who said, I have never bench pressed before. So how do you give an individual cue there? But the thing that was interesting about it was, like, you've got competitive athlete here, competitive powerlifter here, never stepped foot in the gym before here, all doing the same things wrong. Maybe to a different magnitude, like the beginners were way out here, maybe like super narrow with their grip. The competitive athletes were, in a more sensible position, but touch points were generally still way too high up on their chest and all this thing. And like when you looked across the room, it's the same thing with the squat. It's the same thing with the deadlift. So sorry, Ken, but like Ken's plan kind of had to go out the window because it turned into like a group session where it's like, well, these are the 3 things you're all doing wrong.
Well, if we look at this with a bit of common sense, it makes sense because just one group's been doing it wrong for a longer period of time that they got stronger at doing it that way.
Yeah.
Reinforce that technique. So you can do
Well, they
something
got
well,
stronger.
but doesn't mean you're doing it right. So
For sure.
Well, that goes down that whole other strength coach rabbit hole. Like, well, they still did get stronger. So if they get stronger, but it's not a competitive endeavor, it's football or whatever it is, are they not stronger?
Yeah. I get
Right.
that.
So,
no, for sure.
It's
I get that. The one thing I was going to say is, like, Ken was floating around. I'm like, you're bring him in, you're like, Ken, how many of your patients, he's a chiropractor and 1,000 other things, how many of your patients bench press out here? He's like, all of them. How many of them bench press in here tucked, lower touch? Very few of them. So yes, you're stronger, but at what cost? Would always be like, there is no such thing as a bad exercise, except maybe bench dips or burpees. But there is always going to be a consequence or a cost to the exercise you do and then how you perform it. And that's the bit we have to kind of like go back and forth for. Like for him, if you're doing an axle deadlift, from just below the knee and you need to get the last rep to win, is he going to pull it like he's a fishing rod? You damn straight he's going to do that
anyway,
to win.
I can pull it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The consequence is worth the reward. But like all of these people, what we're seeing is like, if this is how you're lifting all day, every day, and you don't have any form of competitive endeavor either, then is it really worth the consequence of doing it poorly? Would be the point I would put across. There's going to be a way that all of them can probably make very quick, I would say easy. I mean, we did it in 20 minutes. So I'm not saying they were perfect 20 minutes later, but their risk or cost just went down drastically and their payoff probably came up. For some people, it could be as little as 15 or 20 minutes, like with a half-decent coach, to just say, well, look, your arm needs to be here. The bar is too high up your back. That's why it's hurting your neck. The deadlift bar is starting over your toes, not over your midfoot and against your shin. It could be something as simple as that is the lowest hanging fruit that gives that person that much better benefit to cost ratio.
And that cost versus reward is a great thing that you bring up, because I am completely against hitching in a deadlift. It is allowed in Strongman. You can most definitely use it. Some use it to a great success and pull off some crazy PRs or event wins. I am 100% against it until I'm in competition. If it means I'm going to win the competition, if I hitch, I will hitch. But the problem is when people start employing that any cost to get a training lift done or a training PR. So that cost versus reward and knowing when you should apply it is very important also.
Well, if we're looking at beginners moving forward, and my bias is going to play into this, but there's that longevity cost. If you are to speak to Ken Kanakin or these other people, what are the typical injuries that you see that are coming from these competitive, or people that train with weights for a long period of time? Lower back and shoulders. Usually is always click, and I'm thinking shitty deadlift, shitty squat, shitty benches, shitty overheads. Would they still happen? Maybe, but later, that's where my strong bias would come in.
Sure.
Hopefully never, because a lot of people do these things seriously for a long period of time and walk away relatively unscathed. Right? So it's going back to the original thought about the deadlift and getting hurt. There's a lot of people that have spent decades deadlifting that have never been hurt.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
And I do think they bear the brunt of what people are probably doing on every movement. What I mean is, your person who's benching up and out here, how are they doing their machine chest presses or their dumbbell press? They didn't just get on a bench and blow off their AC joint one day. They probably doing everything out here, every pressing movement for an extended, the person whose lower back goes on deadlift, maybe they're using the leg press and their butt's coming an inch up off the seat, and they're there's usually more than one factor to these things. It's just usually the deadlift or the squat or the bench press is the most, should we say, stressful per individual unit of use. And that's probably the thing that ultimately makes it go, but there's probably a lot of faulty movement going on that leads to ultimately that deadlift injury.
I see that there would be transference from a barbell lift to the dumbbells to the machines. And maybe the machines would transfer to the barbell, maybe. And the deadlift would have transference, and RDL stiff leg squat would have transference. My bias to everything, because if you learn, I think that's maybe not the easiest movement to perfect how to brace on, but definitely up there in the top 5.
I would say anterior loaded squats probably teach it extremely well. That and overhead press.
I mean, if we're staying with barbells, because we can get outside of barbells with carries and shit like that, and that's probably better with that, but that transference.
We won't see you doing a sandbag carry.
I kind of do, but Tom's seen me do a couple carries here and there. But
not when I'm around.
It's like a quarter, man.
I signed an NDA.
I told him not to tell anybody.
There we go. Finally.
Were there any interesting things that you picked up while you were there? Because there's a lot of different people that you're exposed to.
I mean, these will be weird things to say as takeaways, I'm sure, but the two biggest things for me are kind of linked to what we've already talked about, which was, first off, it was a wide-ranging demographic. Like the talk that Naomi did about coaching competitors at competitions, I don't think they did like a poll. I don't think there was a single person in the audience who'd been coaching for less than 7 years or 6 years. Like that's experience. When that's the lowest, the most inexperienced coach. That's very experienced. And then we had, the powerlifting masterclass. Some of Naomi's group, she had 2 people who'd never bench pressed before. But when we take that really broad demographic, what you have to realize then is within that huge demographic, still probably 80 to 90% of them are in their first year to 18 months of coaching. Even though there's a wide demographic, the huge majority are still these what we'd call beginner coaches. And as a coach and someone who coaches a lot, it was a really nice reminder actually that like it's really cool to try and talk about the advanced stuff, and like I love to nerd out on things, but when it comes to actually helping people and like putting out useful information like we're here to do, that is who you're talking to 80 to 90% of the time. And I think we have our own biases where we kind of like put our more experienced mindset on perhaps and assume that people just know the deadlift, deadlift starts over your midfoot. The bar shouldn't leave your legs whilst you're lifting it. You know what I mean? All these things we just say, we just don't think to bring up because you're like, that it's like, sure, that is beginner stuff. Yeah. But that is 80 to 90% of people. And also the beginners are the ones that need the help the most. So that was a really nice reminder that like when we're thinking about making an impact, that's actually where you make the biggest impact by a mile.
Yes.
I would say. And then kind of like as an aside to that then, it was really interesting to see how, for example, you do your intros at the start, right? I said, I work Christian Thibodeau and Tib Army. I work with you here at Elite FTS. Now, this is in Canada, and CanFit Pro is a Canadian organization. Elite FTS, most people were glazed over. No idea. I mean this in no derogatory way to you or your company. But the same happened when Naomi did her intro at the powerlifting masterclass. 2 all-time world record squats. That's 15 years of training, 12 years of competing to get 2 all-time world records, right? Again, people did not know what that meant, right? And it was just interesting because for me, like being able to work here, and be able to coach people like you, being able to work with you, is a huge accolade for me personally. Like that's something. Yeah, and that's something I'm very proud of. And I will always be that way. For Naomi, her all-time world records is 15 years of hard work, and yet for those 80 to 90% of coaches that we're talking about that actually need the most help, they either don't know what it means or they don't care. What they do care about is the fact that when you are doing those talks, the 2 things that kind of came back in terms of feedback that were appreciated was, A, you made it simple. Like, you didn't talk to me using, like, really advanced terms or like I was stupid. You brought it to my level. And B, you cared enough to listen to me and spend 2 minutes with me afterwards, like, knowing a little bit about me so that you could help. Do you know what I mean? So, like, all of these really cool accolades, titles, whatever we all end up getting throughout our career, for those 80 to 90% of people that really, really need the help, what they want is for you to give a shit and for you to be able to boil down things that may be complicated to really, really simple terms.
So they can use it.
Yeah. But, it was just really nice to have that thrust into your face in like a really obvious way, because it's just, maybe it's an ego check or whatever, but that was the 2 biggest takeaways I got from there, is that is what the world of fitness, strength, whatever really needs, is people who are willing to stop worrying about sounding like the smartest person in the room, which I am guilty of. We are all guilty of it to some degree, and just talk to people where the help is needed at the level they're at. That would be my biggest takeaway.
I was going to say, like, the true level for way of showing that you do know a subject very well is when you can explain it to a 5-year-old, essentially.
Sure.
So being able to not dumb it down, but simplify it in easy to understand terms and ways, and staying away from that trend that's been picking up a lot lately with the science lifting, or the scientific way of doing stuff. That doesn't help the majority of the people. That just complicates things, throws terms that everyone starts regurgitating. That does not actually do anything for the lifting.
Sure.
But being able to explain those simple things and giving a simple checklist for people, that is the true masterclass of it.
Yeah, and that's what the powerlifting master class turned into. Was like, Naomi was the same, and there was 4 or 5 other very good coaches there. It all came down to like 4 or 5 Qs on all 3 lifts. It had to be boiled down into 4 or 5 Qs that everyone had to do because you got 20 minutes. But those 4 or 5 Qs actually applied to everyone. And if we go back to this, all of those would probably be half the size if everyone did those 4 or 5 things.
So is up one of the cues?
Yeah.
Okay.
The louder, the better, though.
Yeah.
The other thing I've noticed, if I'm working with true beginners like that, I mean, things get boiled down to the very simple stuff. Make sure you're grabbing the bar evenly, make sure your feet are even, just the basic things. And then when you get back into, because we end up thinking the way that we do because the people were around most of the time, right? And then when you get back in the gym and you're hyper concerned with, on the bench press, if somebody's using a shirt or whatever it is the bar stacked with the forearm? Is the forearm stacked with the elbow? And you're looking for all these minute things, but after you do something like you just did, and you'll see this in the next week or so, you're going to start watching people in the gym, you're going to realize, man, his grip is off. Right, because we stop looking for those really basic minor things, and the more advanced the lifter gets, some of those may become adjusted because of injuries and compensations and whatever it is. But now their feet aren't even on a certain thing, but it's always bent. The last 2 years it's been that way, but they wonder why their hips all jacked up when they squat now. But we're so concerned with the stacking, where the rib cage is, where the diaphragm, where all these things are, that when you brought it back, you're like, holy crap. It's the same problem that the beginner, it's like a circle.
Full circle,
the meathead circle of, I don't know what to call it, but it's a meathead circle. I don't want to say life. A meathead circle of technique.
Yeah, sure.
Right? You start off with all the same things, and then where you end up, where usually your biggest problems are, is you can't execute those same basic things to the same level before.
Yeah, and so I actually, then yesterday I was at OSU with some of their guys doing just random kind of couple of hours, and it was interesting talking to them because we started talking about like breathing and bracing like we do at the Train Your Ass Off and stuff like that, and they were just a bit, and one of my talks at CanFit Pro was on that same subject, and it's just interesting because no matter who you present it to, what demographic, how advanced or how beginner, all of them have the same reaction. It's, oh my God, I have never braced before. And we've had 900-pound squatters here or whatever at Train Your Ass
You've done that to me.
Then we've got experienced strength and conditioning coaches at OSU. We've got complete beginners through to competitive athletes at CanFit Pro. The reaction is the exact same. It's, you have them do a dead bug properly, and they're like, I have no idea what breathing and bracing is anymore. And it's just, it's all in that same circle again. We are all doing the same things wrong. Now, the 900-pound squatter probably is bracing, but they're nowhere near bracing as well as they could relative to their capacity to brace, So I think that's a great analogy, that kind of circle of technique, because like it all comes around in the end to like probably the same 4 or 5 things that we should all probably just really double down on and then not worry about the other stuff.
How much of that do you think is an issue of people taking for granted that basic? Because walking, nobody thinks about walking or how to walk better, more healthy or more efficiently, because we walk since we're 2 years old or 5 years old. So is that the same issue with bracing, you think, that everyone 100%. Just starts bracing and just assumes that they can brace?
Yeah, 100. I mean, it's hilarious that you say it, because at one point when I got them all into like what would be a neutral pelvis position, I literally had them just walk the length of the weight room. Like it's like a narrow, long weight room. I was like, get your tailbone where it should be, push the crown of your head to the ceiling, and now walk as slow as you need to to not have those points move. And they were like, oh my God, my abs are working. Like, well, you're upright. They should be working, right? So like, and I probably come across like I'm a dick when I do this to people, right? Because it boils down to you don't know how to breathe, you don't know how to stand. But
Yeah, you've come across that way many times, but I appreciate it.
But by then extension, we also don't know how to squat and sprint, jump, whatever. Yeah. So that absolutely plays into it. And it's the same, like that's one of the reasons I think that running has such a bad rap with injuries, because we just assume we can do it and just go into it whole hog and go, look, most people would never just like get in the gym and be like, cool, I'm going to squat 6 days a week. But some people will go out and run 5 or 6 days a week, right? Because we're built to it. We're bipedal organisms. Why would we not do that? And I think that's a big part of why it gets a bad rap there, is just because there's so much assumed knowledge from all of us when we do these things.
And it's one of those things that you can't just go out and run.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean you're doing it right.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So I think having the mindset of always being a beginner is probably the best lesson that anyone, even if they're a beginner now, develop it and keep that. But even if you're an advanced athlete, like, treat yourself like you're a beginner, because at some point someone like Dave is probably going to come along and be like, you realize the bar is crooked on your back, right? When there's 750 pounds on it, and that's why like your right spinal erector is always jacked up, and you're going to have that moment where you're like, if only I had just had the lack of ego to like look for the simple stuff, I guess.
Yeah. So what have you been up to?
Oh, what have I been up to? It's been a busy few weeks. I've been event testing. I've been driving up to Sandusky and Toledo a lot, preparing for the competition.
Has your bruise gone down from the ferry pool now?
That bruise has gone down. I've got other new bruises. Yeah. This Friday I'm up in Toledo again doing a surprise secret medley test. Never been done before, so I'm gonna get some good footage of that. But last week I pulled the ferry boat.
Can you pull out the ferry boat? Are we able to do that?
That was 130 tons of dead weight.
Plus all
people on it, and
we say dead weight. Were the people dead?
I don't know what they keep in the cargo hold. I'm not the captain. I don't judge.
How old's the boat?
I'm not responsible for this.
It's a pretty good boat. It was a really impressive event. I thought it might be harder. That was the first ever attempt doing it. The rope itself ended up being about 200 pounds once it got
What's the diameter of the rope?
Just under 2 inches, or about 2 inches.
Damn. I mean, you've got the performance enhancing hat on.
Yes,
that obviously helped a lot.
I do love my performance enhancing hat and the performance enhancing garbage bag. That was a great last minute.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yeah, I taped on a garbage bag on the floor so I could actually skid on it.
That's fantastic.
That did help a lot. So that trick is getting the boat to move. Once it was moving, it was keeping up with the speed and making sure that you're still pulling it through.
Yeah, and then having a quick enough turnaround that it doesn't stop.
Yeah, so there's a little technique. John Mauser there and Bruce Hamilton. There was a pro wrestler that day. He competes for WWE, does some special appearances. He was there that day, somehow just bumped into us. John Mauser was his coach at some point for Strongman. So it just happened to be he's walking past like, John? we roped him into we roped him into trying out the boat. He loved it. He made some great posts about it. But that was the one technique I had to show them through because of that weight of the rope in the water. Every time you'd pull over, normally people would let go of the rope and start pulling over, but because it's so heavy and it wants to pull away from you, if you let go of it, it sinks all the way. So you have to pull it in, lock it with your elbow, and then reach over with the other arm, and then
the bruise.
Exactly.
So I was thinking, like, now you've got water resistance rather than air resistance, like a truck pull, and you also have currents that I guess could be pushing it away.
So luckily, where we did that was in a bay.
Okay,
so it's like a jet slip. You can see there. You can see a little bit of waves out in the open, but the moment you're inside this little slip, the water's perfectly calm.
Cool.
And you can even see some wind on the flags. None of that affected the boat.
Okay.
How soon till the rope gets wet when you're pulling?
It's wet right away. Yeah. So like I was using good gloves. I spent a whole week researching gloves. I spent a week researching what the best glove is for pulling a boat or rope or whatever it is. Yep. That's how in
How
depth
much
we get. as
useful
strongmen.
information was there on that?
Surprising, honestly surprising, especially from the marine world
Yeah.
and people saying what they use for working on ships and tankers and oil rigs. That gave a lot of useful insight.
How are the other events coming up or coming around?
So, very well. There's some very surprising, unique events. As I said before, I hate plates, anything plate loaded. So we're staying away from any plate loaded events. So it's going to be very unique looking so far. We're going to have a lot of coverage by the...
You're talking so much like a promoter right now.
Yeah.
Tell me about some of the events you can tell us about.
what can I tell you about?
I know you got to keep
This would be
things
a-
in the bag, but come on.
This will be an announcement if I say anything. All right, so...
Just basic. Like, you do have a deadlift type event.
We do have a deadlift type
Okay.
event. It's going to be fantastic. I've borrowed a bar from you already. I
So
spent
it
the time.
involves a bar. Okay, we know that.
It involves a bar,
Yeah.
but that's about it. I was at the fab shop yesterday. We have the designs for the attachment.
that
Let's
will
say it
be
will involve heavy equipment.
Yeah, that will be a good
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
I know that one. I will
Yep.
let that slip, but that's going to be
There's going to be an exciting medley on Friday, the one that I'm going to test this Friday. Very athletic, very cardio, and it will involve some of that showmanship of the American football. You know, back when they used to run through walls or perform cool tricks. There's a little spoiler there.
Yeah.
How much do you think that needs to come back into strongman? Because
Yes.
there's going to be a
Yes.
group of spectators right, that have the opinion that
Yeah.
and I'm not taking anything away from the level of performance of the athletes involved, but people miss the squatting bars with Playboy bunnies attached to them
Yep.
and whatever, carrying fridges,
Yep.
whatever. So how much of that for you is like a quintessential, like an essential part of strongman that probably needs to come back?
Absolutely essential. Do I think it needs to be in every single competition, especially on the more amateur level? No. If you can afford to add it in, absolutely. It looks great for the audience. It looks great for the athletes. At a professional level, yes, every single event needs to be a show. Well, I don't know why anyone would want to pay to watch you lift a deadlift with plates on it, unless it's a deadlift specific competition where we get to see the 505 kilogram deadlift record by Thor. That was interesting to see just because I know that's what I'm going to see. But if I'm going to see a competition, I don't want to see another deadlift.
Sure. Well, you can just pay $5 to go to a local powerlifting meet and watch that.
Yeah.
I guess. So.
Pretty much. So staying away from the mundane, trying to add something different. Granted, I'm going to have two events. Some guys already know, so this can be a sort of announcement. There will most likely be stones. Slater's doing a fantastic job of putting the stones together for me. They will be the regular weights that we use, but we're also trying to play around with the platform, making it look a little more exciting. And one of the other events is a truck pull. Granted, I could use any truck. It doesn't matter what truck I use. And we just did have a truck pull competition in UK over this last weekend. The guys did fantastic. It was a big British motor show. There were over 60,000 audience members, visitors of the show. So a good number of those actually saw our competition. Even in that case, the event that I'm setting up is a unique gas tanker. That's all chrome, all fancy, never been done before as far as I know. So there's a ton of safety compliance, security, like all these little things that we have to go through to make sure that we can bring a tanker into public and pull it and keep it safe. But to me, that is worth it because on camera, seeing that chrome tanker pull down the street in front of a crowd is going to be fantastic. So that wow
blow
factor.
it up at the end.
Oh man, I'm trying to put sparklers on. Even the cold sparklers. The amount of questions and security issues we have to go through, like how far away they have to be from the tanker and whatnot. It's.
Oh, I can imagine. And do you have a list of the crew questions?
Yeah, we got them right here.
Okay. All right. So
can
while
start.
you're looking through those, let me tell everybody that we have a 10% discount code, Table Talk. Right now on the site, we have 25% off apparel, bands, and straps and wraps and sleeves. And this 10% adds an additional 10% to the 25%. So head over to elitefts.com, help support the content and podcast. So what do we got for the questions?
Well, I want to start with Cody's one because considering what you opened with, it's very relevant. And that is, what is Dave's opinion on prehab? Specifically, most people doing prehab to supposedly prevent certain outcomes because they either are very prevalent or they're worried about them, whatever it might be. Do you think it actually does a good job for preventing injuries, or do you think it's more of a mindset thing where people do it just to make themselves feel better?
I think it's setting you, how do I want to say this? I think it's setting yourself up to get hurt. Because if I go into a training session saying I need prehab, I'm subconsciously telling myself this means I'm going to need rehab from something that I need, because I'm doing something pre, which means you see, like, okay, I'm going to pre-get hurt.
Yeah.
So I have to have the rehab. So I think it's better to just have a warm-up that effectively warms up everything that you need to be able to do whatever you need to do for that day. You know, the word prehab's always like this weird ass thing. The other thing that, and I've gone back and forth on this, I'm sure I've had programs written 10 years ago where it had like a prehab block and stuff like that. But the terminology was always something that kind of set me off a little bit. And then I often wondered that if you're doing prehab for, say, rotator cuff, because you have some issues with the rotator cuff, and it goes beyond just simple activation, is it really a good idea to fatigue the thing that is the issue that you have before you do a loaded thing that when you start straining is going to probably fall onto the thing that's the problem that you just now have fatigued more so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so I think being aware of what the potential injuries, and I kind of changed my mind on that as well too, but I was always super cautious of knees, you know, when I was all through my powerlifting career, because that's what I saw people getting hurt. I'm like, this sucks. I'm seeing people ice their knees before meets, and like, I don't want to fuck my knees up because this is putting people out. And I would do things like single leg squat. I would do things that I thought best would be able to help, and I never had any issues. A strain here and there, but nothing that took me out of a single squat training session. Never had a hip issue in my entire life. Never, ever did anything prehab or support-wise for my hips. I mean, I get out of the sport, I'm like, thank God, you know, it's just my shoulder. I tore some pecs and stuff like that, but my lower body was unscathed. Like, I'll take that as a win. Like 5 years later, I got 2 fucking prosthetics. I'm like, what? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, what was the whole, you know, what was the whole point of that? But if somebody has something that is a problem, then figure out what the problem is. And most of the time, from what I tell, and I'll let you guys comment, but what I've seen looking back, not just on myself, but on other people as well, what they think is the problem isn't the root cause of the problem at least 60% of the time. You know, they think it's the bicep, but it might be the shoulder. They think it's the shoulder, it might be the bicep. It might be the, you know, thoracic. It's never what they think it is. So then I wonder, like, what's the point of the prehab then? Because now you're not even activating the thing that's the real problem. But warming it up to be able to do what you're supposed to do is important.
I mean,
So what if?
Go on.
Yeah. What if we replace the word prehab with some warm-up mobility work, some jumps, explosive work? You know, kettlebell swings, or.
I have 2 thoughts on it, but I want your guys' thoughts as well, right? I have 2 thoughts on that. Is you have to have a plan that's going to cover those bases, right? But you also have to have a plan that if you're going to go into an event and you are not able to do any of those things, you can't become dependent upon this 45 minutes or 30 minutes of specific warm-up, rotation, mobility work to be able to do before you compete. It's not, if you can, great, but you have to expect the unexpected, and that may not be possible, and all you're going to have might be a band and your body weight to be able to get ready.
Absolutely agree. So then we can separate a training mobility warm-up and then the competition day mobility warm-up.
Yeah, I'd
which would be
rather
two
see it
entirely
all
different
blocked
things.
out. I'd rather see a whole block focusing more on mobility and conditioning, and then bring that to a level that's over and above what's going to be required for what you're going to need moving forward. So when it does diminish, you're still within that striking range. And then you just use a little bit to maintain it. And then, of course, over different phases, it's going to drop under, what's where it typically should be. But by that time, you should be ready to peak and then out of it and back into that next phase. Your thoughts?
I would say if it takes you 20 or 30 minutes to prep to do an exercise, it's the wrong exercise, or you're not in a position where you should be doing it heavily, regularly in the long term. Like, if you got to spend 20 minutes to get under a straight bar and you're 2 weeks out from a meet, you got to do what you got to do. But like, if we're talking general training, I think a lot of the time prehab and all the wonderful things that fall under that umbrella term, when people think of that, a lot of the time is being used to mask poor exercise selection, poor training decisions, as in they're doing high amounts of volume or movements maybe that are a very poor fit for them, so therefore their shoulders are getting beat up because they're doing high volume of dips that they execute poorly, whatever. And they're using that to kind of put a band-aid over a bigger problem that they should be fixing, which could be their technique, could be their programming, etc. Or they're doing it because they're too married to an exercise that they feel like they have to do. Which in reality, for most of us, even those of us who compete in specific lifts where there are sports where you have to do X, Y, and Z, you probably can get away with doing the specific lift less than you think, and it's probably not the lift you need to do to work on the weakness anyway.
Yeah.
So that's how I would look at it. Like, for me, I almost would look at it like an athlete has to look at it. Like, maybe you get like 3 1-hour sessions to train a week. Like, what lifts are you doing in those 3 1-hour sessions that actually make the most of your training stimulus? Like, if straight bar back squat takes you 30 minutes to warm up for, well, it's a crappy choice in that environment. 'Cause, most of us do have limited training time. Most of us do have limited resources. So in that scenario, like, why would you choose that if you don't have to? Or could it just be a bow bar for a while, or, cambered bar, whatever? It could be 100 different things. But to me, needing that level of prep work for a lift is a bad sign for me, barring like some kind of structural abnormality or, being very close to a competition. I would say if it takes you more than 20 minutes, it's the wrong choice.
I'd say for me, it's a twofold thing. Competition day, it will not take me more than 5 minutes to warm up. I'm game. I'm ready to go. I need that 5-10 minutes just to get blood flowing, make sure that I'm functional in the movement that I have to do. And oftentimes we don't even have the luxury of going from event to event where I'm already warm. There's nothing left to warm up. So as long as I know I'm mobile, the blood's going, my heart rate's going, that's it. Training days, I can alternate, but for me, any kind of this warm-up mobility, prehab work is more of getting into a mental state. So I might do some kettlebell swings, I might hop around, I'll stretch my knees, etc. Feel good because I know that 20-minute, 30-minute build-up that I might take getting to that state, the moment I'm done with it, that's it, that's work time from then on. There is no lazing about, there's no spending time in between. I know that once I'm done with my warm-up, I have to go. That's it. It's full workout mode after that.
Sure.
So I take the opportunity to just let my mind think about the workout, look at my program a bunch, think about the things I want to change or do about it, forget whatever I was doing in the whole day, forget about work if I have to, and then just focus on the training.
So it's almost more of a mental
Yeah,
process than physical.
definitely more of a mental placebo process.
Sure. Cool. I want to skip to one because you already mentioned it. So is there anything, thank you Tyler by the way, is there anything you would have given up or changed to save your hips and prolong the time it took to get a replacement? Or was the experience of lifting big weights and pushing the envelope worth the price? At what point in an athlete's career should they start doing preventative maintenance on their body? That's an interesting term.
Yeah, it was worth the price, but do I have any choice? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It's like with Ronnie Coleman saying the only thing I regret is doing 3 other reps. It's like, what choice do you have?
Yeah.
I can't go back and change anything. If you could go back and change anything, would I change anything hip-wise? No. No, because for a couple reasons. The number of people that I know that I competed with, lift with, that have been lifting for the same duration, that have had hip replacements. Just the other day, for shits and giggles, I just started writing names. I had 32 names, of people that I know. So I don't want to sit there and say that it's going to happen no matter what. So
How many more are about to get it also?
probably 10.
On the cusp.
I will say probably not more than once every couple months. I have at least one person reach out to me.
Okay.
That's.
So it's still a steady rate.
It's a steady rate, yeah. So from the hip part, no. The second part of the question, what was it? Was it worth it? Yeah, it was worth it, but I can't change it. So, and there would be nothing that I'd want to change. Do I know it took? Do I feel that if average life expectancy is like 78, that it took 10 years off my life? Yeah, I probably did. Am I okay with that? Yeah, I'm okay with that.
The last question
reward.
was, again, this kind of feeds into the previous prehab question, was at what point do you think people should start doing preventative or maintenance style work? This feeds into prehab nicely, I feel.
It's such a loaded question without context, because it may be too much work that's going to lead to problems, right? Because their conditioning and work capacity is barely holding on to what they're doing now, because the programming's not optimized for them. That you put in just that little bit, even though it's not a whole lot, now you just pushed it over the edge and they're going to get hurt, or accumulate more wear and tear. I think you always need to be thinking to some degree about maintenance and longevity, like how long are you going to be able to last in the sport? And just having that mindset is going to allow you to mitigate your stupid decisions a little bit better, because you're still going to make them, but you're going to make them less if you know it's going to take something off the back end of the whole thing. But you can't mitigate all of it, or you're never going to be good. That's what I think. It's a very fucked up message to put out there, because I want to try to tell people, look, if you train smart, you can add 3 more years on the back end of when you're your best. And that's great. But you can't be such a puss about doing that you never even get to your best in the first place, because you're not pushing hard enough for that to be. And that is harder than what people think it is. It's not easy, where it's a weird balance. It's like 2 different conversations. It's like the first one is, you're not training hard enough. You don't want it hard enough. You think you are, but you're not. That's the first one. But then once they get to that level, it's like, okay, now you need to start to control this stupidity a little bit. You still need it, but we got to periodize it. It's 2 different phases. And the messaging gets weird because you're kind of talking to both. But in reality, we're probably talking to the first phase more than we're talking to the second phase. And in that phase, as you think you're training hard, you're not. And by that, I don't mean you're huffing and puffing and puking and grinding. It's your ability to express force within the repetitions you're doing is not where it needs to be. And that's just the fact. You need to tighten up your technique. You need to learn how to use compensatory acceleration. You need to learn how to have more muscle, your motor units firing when they're supposed to fire. And when you do that right and effectively, 5 really hard reps is going to kick you in the dick. If you're doing 5 real hard reps and you strain and your eyes are, it's not the same 5 reps. And the only difference is that motor unit activation, the central nervous system, the brain, what's going into that. And that's a trained attribute, and I don't think people look at that the way that they should.
So that's the intent that you mentioned last time we were on here.
Yeah.
So on that note then, do you think people have the wrong idea when we say preventative? Because I don't know about you, when I read like preventative work, I think like band pull apart, cable face pull.
Well, also when you say
right?
preventative, I also assume that people already have an issue and then are trying to mitigate or prevent it.
What I mean is, when people hear words like prehab and stuff, that stuff comes in, but
your program sucks.
Yeah, right, exactly. So that is come in because something's already broken. Whereas in reality, the real preventative is lifting well, good programming, sleeping enough. You get what I'm saying, like warming up properly for your sessions. Like that's the actual prevention.
Becoming a master of your minimum effective dose. And then that can go up when your other life abilities can withstand it. So to me, that minimum effective dose is your sleep isn't good, your nutrition's fair, all those things are fair, but that minimum effective dose doesn't destroy you, but it's still hard.
Yeah.
Right. And when those other things get dialed in, that can go up a little bit. But what typically happens is they want to find the maximal effective dose and then not have those other factors to be able to mitigate that. But in all these things, the prehab, the rehab, all this other kind of stuff, a GPP and all this, your program sucks. It's just fix the base of the program.
Do you think we almost look at it backwards then in a way? Because how often does a lifter come to you, or like you're coaching strongman, they will say a statement like, I can't deadlift more than once a week. And they will look at that almost like it's a definitive statement, and they have to maybe do a bunch of prehab work or whatever. But if you look at, and I know weightlifting is different, but if you look at athletes in any other sport, they're all training like 4, 5, 6 days a week. And I get that once you introduce loading, it's different, but we don't, at no point do those same athletes turn around and go, I would like to get to the point where I can deadlift 3 days a week. I'm not saying I need to or I should do it regularly, but I want to be physically capable of achieving that.
Well, if they're being
What do I need
honest,
to do?
if they're being honest, what they're really saying is, I don't have the work capacity to deadlift twice a week. And that's okay, if that's your minimum work capacity. But you could.
Yes.
Right, but it means you're going to have to build a higher work capacity.
I mean,
which
there are
means-
coaches that will chastise you for deadlifting twice a week.
Yeah, sure.
Whilst that should be cool, you actually managed to do that.
I mean, really think this through. It's a lot to be able to do that. It's not going to happen in a month or 2 months.
And it's not going to happen every week either.
But is it necessary? There's the other downstream questions, like, is this necessary? Is it going to help? What's the overreaching goal? Sometimes that answer might be yes. Okay, that's true. You just don't start doing it.
Sure.
What's going to come out? What's going to replace? And so, to answer your question,
I find that just we tend to ignore the should we say the rabbit hole of like, I would like to be able to train more. It's kind of just accepted that like, don't overtrain, but like, if
increase your capacity,
God forbid, like he starts BJJ next week, right, and starts decimating people, but like he might be able to spar once a week and he's cooked for days, right? He wouldn't just go, oh well, guess I'm only sparring once a week. He's going to go, I need to get fitter. I need to, or
What can I do to do two
or
times a
how
week?
can I spar better so that I don't get as busted up from it? Cool. But we don't really seem to apply that to like our training as a powerlifter or a strength athlete. And I think that is where most people are maybe hitting a ceiling. It's just like, well, you can't train enough to get better because you're not fit enough, or your movement quality is too poor, your program is bad. Take that step back and earn the right to train more, and then maybe that's how you get to the next step, rather than maybe it's not cluster sets or reverse bands or ammonia or more tren or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I might be tooting on the same horn a few times, but like as I said, we had a competition in SEL this weekend. Some of the same athletes are competing this very same next weekend. I competed in 2 competitions back to back. A lot of us do. Being able to recruit that 100% of effort back to back, week to week, is the same concept as being able to train the same thing 2-3 times a week. That is essentially what you're doing. So yes, that capacity should exist there. You should be able to work up to that. And being the one-trick pony that competes once a year isn't a great show of your ability.
So we should all be competitive strongmen for a year and then realize that like what we're doing is actually really easy.
Yeah, probably.
On that note, since we're talking about recovery and work capacity, Andrew, thank you for your question. If you had $5,000 to spend on your ultimate set of self-care and rehab tools to look after yourself and lengthen a lifting clear, what would you buy and how would you use it?
A mattress. The best mattress I could
That is
buy.
the right answer.
And I have zero affiliation with Purple Mattress, but I got one of those when it first came out many years ago, and I've had purchased 3 since then, and I'm sure it's not $4.99 like when I bought it many years ago. So a good mattress is probably going to end up costing probably half of that, and it's worth its weight in gold. And use whatever for a lot of the lifters that I would know.
For you, what is it about Purple Mattress? What is it about that mattress style or whatever that is the difference maker? Like what is someone looking for if they're a lifter?
If I'm on a hard mattress, or if I'm on a crappy mattress, it feels like I had the shit kicked out of me overnight. You know,
Yes.
just the joints, the way, because you're not moving, right? So all the blood's kind of just like settling in one place. Then you get up and everything hurts like a bitch.
Especially
And,
as a heavier, bigger athlete.
you know, and it's just that because of the cone shape, and there's other, you know, ones that are similar to this, you know, allows my body to move a little bit more freely, and so I don't wake up feeling like I just got hit with a fucking bat all the time, and sleep better as well. A lot of bigger dudes, the mattress is going to start to sag. You know, nobody's going to flip their mattress. Yeah, everybody talks about flip. No, I know not one person that's ever flipped their mattress once, but they're going to have, you know, that big. So now they end up sleeping in a cradle, you know, which is kind of like one of those slings.
I can endlessly complain about how many times I slept at a hotel or Airbnb. The mattress was so soft that I slept in that cradle V shape, my legs and head elevated, and woke up the most miserable person the next day.
Yeah, I mean, your
and
neck,
had to
everything.
compete.
Yeah.
Anything to get a better night's sleep. And I mean, we can talk supplements, we can talk peptide, we can talk all these different things, but the core most important thing is the mattress.
Sure.
You know, it's sleep on the floor, get the grounding. Fuck you. I am not sleeping on the floor. You know what I would wake up feeling like if I slept on the fucking floor? It would be awful.
Although I have to say, sleeping on the floor is sometimes better than some of those mattresses.
Well,
I have
for
that.
sure.
I have had
For
that
sure.
experience.
For
Where
sure.
sleeping on the couch or floor was significantly better than whatever mattress was in the hotel.
Yeah, and what's ever left over, if you have even somewhat of a thick neck and you're a lifter, use the rest to buy a CPAP. And then, so we just dial in the sleep, which is the most important out of all. Well, how do you rank hydration, right? You're dehydrated, you die.
Yeah.
You know, nutrition, you don't eat, you die. So water has to come first, right? Because you die faster. Then food.
So these are Dave's top rehab tools.
Yeah, so water,
Top prehab.
food, and then sleep. then
three
yes,
prehab
because
tricks
you will
that
literally
doctors
die
look for.
if you take those away, right? So now, if they're optimized to the best they can, and they're the three things that can actually kill you, would they not be the three things that would have the best correspondence to performance?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So-
So Purple Mattress and any water sellers out there, if you have a sudden spike and increase in sales, you know who to sponsor.
Yeah, for sure.
We will accept water and mattress sponsors.
Now, if I was to throw another one in there, and it's only because I almost wanted to cry earlier today, Ken Kanakin gave me a percussor many years ago, which is like
Massage
a
gun.
jacked up. It's a very, very good massage gun. It's not the same as the other ones, and for some reason it wasn't clicking on today, and I almost wanted to cry. You're right. So I would say a really good percussor, and if it is dead, which I don't think it is, I probably just not plugged in, kind of like my CPAP thing. But if it is dead, it lasted at least 10 years.
Oh, damn.
You know,
Wow.
so
Yep.
that would be the only one.
It's not your $30 from Temu.
No,
one, then. It's a little
God,
bit
no,
better.
those suck.
The ones that you put any pressure in, they just go. You're like,
Yeah.
Oh, well,
The
another 30
best one I've ever made was an actual jigsaw gun and attaching a golf ball onto the
golf
bit.
ball.
Yep, onto
Yeah.
the bit. That has worked.
Those
since
can
I
get
came out
dicey
with
when
it.
you get close to a bone, though. Like the
yeah.
well, I mean, you got big joints and shit.
Get
but
bigger.
yeah.
There you go. So, next one. I'm going to go this one just because it's next in the order. You talked about how if you had practiced in gear more often at Westside, you probably would have lifted bigger numbers. Makes sense. Do you think, however, this would have also helped you compete for longer, or do you think it would have potentially shortened your career due to lifting heavier?
Shortened it.
You would have shortened. Okay. Do you don't think it was the common point would be like, oh well, lifted in gear saves your joints.
Well,
less, right?
it's asked to me,
Yeah.
right? So I already had 15 years before getting into Westside, right? So let's keep that context in. That just would have put more larger loads more frequently, you know.
Yeah.
So yes, the carryover, I feel, would have been higher because the specificity just makes sense. Would have been higher. The total output would have been higher. I'd trade 3 years for that, you know, without any problem. Now, given different context, you know, and not having 20 years of competing or whatever, by the time that came to where gear started to change, then, and I started later, then yes, I still think so, but it would not have been done the same way. Like the way I would have had to do it would have been more frequent bouts because there wasn't that much time left, right? And the gear was evolving fast. Where now the gear is pretty much evolved to where it is, so it doesn't need to be every other week. I would have had to build the work capacity to be able to go heavy like once every 7 or 10 days, right? So that's a whole nother kind of like we talked about with the deadlift thing. That's a whole other thing that would have taken a year to be able to build that work capacity to do that, then to be able to get those other bouts. And given different context, it would just be going heavy maybe once a month, you know, relatively to where my strength is at the time, you know, just to get used to all that. But yeah, it's the actual answer is yes, it probably would have taken me out a little bit sooner, but the output would have been better. Now, given different context, I don't know if it would have increased, you know, just that aspect. Given that aspect and maybe training a little bit smarter and doing things better, then it would have.
I want to ask this one to you both then, since it's more general. The number one supplemental or accessory exercise to squat, bench, and deadlift, regardless of sticking point, which is an interesting caveat. And it says here, regardless of sticking point, that transfer to overall strength and bigger numbers on those lifts. So basically, one accessory movement, if you had to prescribe it on a blanket statement for everyone for squat, bench, and deadlift, what would they be?
Front squat.
Which type? Ooh,
Front
there's
squat.
So many.
Just as a blanket exercise, front squat. There's just no other answer, especially if you're a strongman athlete.
Yeah, for sure. Dave's deadlift accessory movement is going to be back squat.
Yeah.
So then you get to back squat more. I love that.
So my answer is going to have a caveat. I'm going to put for the squat and deadlift, I'm going to put an RDL. I would like to go with the front squat, but
I already picked it.
well, you already picked it, but that's not the biggest issue that I see. You know, we kind of already talked about. The biggest issue I see is more that hip hinging. The caveat would be I maybe throw in like some downstream leg presses or just something for something for quad work, like probably single leg squats, so it's not heavy load. You know, so there's not as much systemic fatigue. It still doesn't. It doesn't fix the bracing problem. Like I'm trying to balance the bracing problem with the hip hinge problem, but this is a movement, right? And the bracing can kind of be taught with anything, and probably best taught just without the movement. The bench.
Front squat.
Yoke carry.
Bench press, but vertical.
Yeah. Standing bench press. As God intended.
I want to say the JM press so bad, right? But most people fuck it all up. So it becomes a tough one to be able to put in there. What I worry about is when you start to put in bench accessories and they have bad form. And then if it's a 2-board or 3-board, you're just introducing higher loads with bad form, just reinforcing that worst technique. Where at least with the JM press, if it's a modified, it's more the tricep and it's kind of eliminating the bottom end, you know, the other things in there like that. So a JM press, if it can be done effectively, then I'm bouncing between like a neutral grip press with a barbell, but I'm tending to kind of want to lean more to a neutral grip dumbbell incline press, just to keep the load down, but to get that pattern ingrained a little bit better. Things work in cycles, and we're in this weird phase right now where it seems to be overstimulation of loads. You know, like everybody wants to lift heavier shit on everything. So it's where I would have said like close grip bench press. Sure. Right, but see, that just plays into the problem that I already see everybody doing. So how can we reduce the load but get the same movement pattern, the same adaptation with lighter loads that aren't going to fuck everything else up? So downstream, you go to the dumbbells, you cut the load down, you focus, a little bit more.
From what I've observed, most powerlifters have surprisingly weak and terrible shoulders. So throwing in overhead press work or some sort of incline bench work, whether it's a log or dumbbells or whatever it is almost mandatory for them, and none of them seem to want to do it.
Well, that's
Because it's hard.
it plays into
Yeah.
the fact from what I see, and there's a limitation there because we don't see everything, right? Is the number of lifters that are just doing squat, bench, and deadlift, and any accessory, maybe like a lat pull or whatever it is. It's a
Tricep
lot.
pull down.
It's a lot. It's probably a higher percentage than it's ever been before,
Yeah.
right? And they're training it hard, right? So it's not like it's not being pushed. Where now you put in just heavy RDLs with their deadlift day, you kind of in a way are increasing their total workload and deadlift volume for that day by 40% right out of the gate. And that's a lot because they're really barely recovering from what they're doing to begin with. But now if it's dumbbell RDLs, right, now that increase is only 15, 20%. And they're strong. Right, they're strong. They're just not activating the shit they're supposed to activate.
Yes.
So it's more movement based than it is load based. So in today's world, I'm more worried about that load based solution, where 10 years ago I would have been completely opposite.
Sure.
But now it's this, because they can recover from it, and then they can slowly get better at it, and then move to the actual close grip incline barbell press, which is probably the movement I really want to say.
Yeah.
Because it hits like a steep incline. It hits like everything. But I think if they just threw it in from the jump right now on their bench day, the load's going to be like 70% of what their bench load's going to be. The sets and reps are going to be probably higher than what the bench is going to be, and they're going to tank.
Okay. So what about then, and this may or may not get controversial, but it adds on a little bit to what Tom was saying earlier, where sometimes and often the lift that they should be doing is not the lift that they actually compete with. And like with Ed Cohen, for example, his whole thing in the off season is never doing the actual competitive lifts, doing any other variation of it. So once again, you're saying squat, bench, deadlift, but we take out the squat, the bench, and the deadlift, and we replace it with a front squat, incline press, overhead press, whatever it is, and a RDL.
How about instead of doing 4 to 6 work sets, you just do 2? And then you save some of that energy to move on to the other things that are going to help build those lifts. You know, and I say everything with a pause.
Yeah, and it all depends.
Maybe that lifter is fine-tuned on everything, and they do need those 4 to 6 work sets on that main thing. But it's rare. It's rare for most. You know, but that's what we see is that work volume in that main lift. It's
too much.
It's not just working up to like one set.
Yeah.
You know, it's working up to the one set, then a back down set, then maybe an AMRAP set. Like, okay, well, let's just fuck the AMRAP set and get rid of that, because what purpose does it really serve outside of mental? And then replace it with something else, you know, that can actually build better movement patterns, better bracing, better hip hinging. And then you're going to see this huge carryover. And we all know this to be true because we hear it all the time. Like, man, I threw in these fucking, you know, Tom told me to do these, you know, 4 block hip hinge pulls and not use over 275. And my squat went up like 50 pounds in a month. You know, he's a fucking genius. It's like, yeah, you just didn't know how to fucking. You're strong. You know what I'm saying? They're strong enough to do what they're just not doing it as effectively as they should. They're not displaying the strength they have.
Yep. In my whole training career, I've almost never done a back down and an AMRAP set after doing my main thing, but I have always gone to an exercise that complements it very well after.
Oh, I have, because I'm stupid. You know, and it's a challenge. I get why people do it. Like, it's a challenge. You know,
it's but that's
fine.
a challenge.
But
It's not a workout.
Yeah, and I know it's stupid, and there's a cost you're going to pay for it.
Yeah.
But I don't think most people know what the cost is that you're going to pay for it. It could be that next week you're going to fuck your training cycle. There's a lot of things.
The follow-up question is, which is more important for longevity, prehab or rehab? So I'm just going to go ahead and just segue. Feel we've covered that. So Alabama Matt. Hey, Matt.
I'll answer that because, okay, let's assume you need the rehab. Something went wrong.
Yep.
Right? Because that word would not be used if something didn't break.
Sure.
Then have somebody that knows, have 2 people. Have whoever your physician says that you have to see. Right, because you got to check the box, and then have somebody that really knows what they're doing, that is also a physical therapist that's in your corner, that can bridge the gap because you have rehab, which would be post-surgery. Then you have, I guess, what we would call post-rehab, which is like a transition block before you get back into your real training. What's non-existent in the medical field would be post-rehab, right? Yep. So the rehab just gets your range of motion back or whatever they need to do in 10 visits, bare minimum, then 2 years kicked off. And then most people will go from there and try to go straight into their own training, and they skip this post-rehab window, where if you get somebody like Danielle Martina or somebody that really knows what they're doing, they can help bridge that gap to be able to move you into that next phase. That's more important than prehab.
Even more so from my experience with all the injuries, surgeries, etc. The rehab is skipping that initial rehab stage of getting the basic movement and going straight into what can we do to regain everything that I've lost as soon as possible. So skip the bare minimum, skip the 3 months in a cast. Granted, this is not medical advice, but this is all experience that right after surgery I started trying to regain movement as much as is physically possible within a safe, pain-free.
Yeah, and that's where you need that person to be.
That is 100% mandatory for a good recovery.
Right. I want to ask you the next one. From Alabama, Matt. Hope you're doing well, sir. I came from Strongman, and it seems to have had a good carryover to other strength sports, including powerlifting. Matt has some very good lifts to back up that statement. What is your opinion on using strongman training for beginner or intermediate powerlifters for a bit of their training to develop a wider base of strength? Which I guess alludes back to the whole squat, bench, deadlift accessory.
100%, and this is something I wanted to bring up earlier in our discussion, that when we're discussing the GPP or whatever else you might throw in my observation of a lot of the powerlifters that either have come from more athletic background or are now throwing in more athletic work, whether it's rowing or some sort of strongman exercises, sandbag carries, some sort of sprints, anything that adds some sort of functionality and athleticism to them, they have put up way bigger numbers, they have recovered way better from their training sessions, they have prevented a lot of potential injuries, or they had injuries that were starting to show up as a potential injury, and they said, all right, I started doing this cardio work or whatever it was, and I feel so much better, and my hips stopped hurting, or my back stopped hurting. So yes, 100%, any kind of athletic, and it doesn't have to be strongman, but any kind of functional strength movement will carry over a ton.
Do you think a big part of why it has the benefits it does is just because there's a greater variety of movement patterns trained? Absolutely.
You're training in every plane and direction. You're training unoptimally, suboptimally, in every worst and best way of that as it is possible. You're picking up sandbags, stones. There is no perfect technique. It all depends on your levers, the size of the implement. Every single implement is different depending on the gym that you're at. Even on the day, like I was talking with the guys training with us now, Terrence, they do stones in his backyard in grass. So like every time it drops down, they have to reach further and grab some grass with it. Is that optimal? Absolutely not. Will that train you and teach you how to potentially avoid injuries or issues? Very likely. Or build up something if you're doing it right. So yeah, moving in non-traditional, non-fixed, non-set patterns will make you a better athlete down the line, because you can prevent injuries, because you're now stronger in those ranges of motion. So anytime you might accidentally fail a squat, dump the bench on you, all of a sudden that is not a movement that you've never been in, and your muscle is so strained past that point that it suddenly snaps or tears off, or whatever other injury that you might have. It is a range of motion that is still strong, you're just not strong enough for that lift in that, and now you've just prevented a major injury, surgery, and whatever else is associated with it. So yes, being stronger and safer in every possible range of motion that you can be is a huge plus going forward into any sport that you do.
To piggyback on the point you made about a lot of people kind of overdoing squat, bench, deadlift, do you think there's and this feeds into your point of having more variety too, do you think there's a genuine kind of misconception that there's a difference between the amount of training you can handle and the amount of a lift you can handle? What I mean by that is like, I can handle 150 work sets per week. Therefore, I can do 50 sets of back squat, 50 sets of bench, but it doesn't work like that. Like your top ceiling for deadlift might be 20 sets. So if you did go for 50, bad things are going to happen. So like by having a greater variety, that person might find they can actually train more in total because they're not running into the limiting factor perhaps associated with that specific movement or lift.
Yeah.
Do you think?
I mean, in a way, it's conjugate. If you really think through how a lot of people would define conjugate, you know, it would be even that. Where I worry with the strongman is in the demographic that more than likely is listening harder, you know, so the ones that are intermediate plus, they're not going to scale back to start, right? So when, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume I'm speaking for what you guys are saying. If they're going to start with sandbag carries, you're not telling them to go grab the 150-pound bag and start carrying the 150-pound bag. Or if it's a yoke, you're not telling them to grab a 600-pound yoke. It's, you know, grab whatever you can that's going to be light for you, you know, to be able to manage it and do it correctly, and then scale up from there, right? Because when they're starting at 0, they've done 0 carries. The way that I'll see this, if you just grab a 15 dumbbell per hand, which is, granted, it's nothing, right? There's still going to be adaptation from you just walking with the 15-pound dumbbell.
Absolutely.
Then the next week there'll be adaptation when you go to like the 25 or the 30. And at the end of the day, we're all looking for the adaptation, not the load, not the weight, the adaptation of what the stimulus you're doing. Yeah. So going from a 15-pound dumbbell to a 150-pound dumbbell over a 3-month period of time is a lot of adaptation. Yeah. Meanwhile, they could go, when what they will do, right, they're going to go 50s week 1, 75s week 2, 150s week 3. And then adaptation's pretty much blown its shot, right? And they got to switch and go on to something else. Where if they seek out the stimulus that has the adaptation that's going to have the highest correspondence, run that as long as you can, because this is where I think people they lose sight, is the adaptation's what you're training for, not the number, not the load, not because that is a fantastic point. That's it, right?
Especially with the injuries that you mentioned earlier. And I think part of what is attributing towards that is with the rise of popularity, a lot of other athletes and sports and powerlifters even are trying to get into strongman. And you take a guy that can squat 900 pounds, he's strong, regardless of any way you look at it, he's strong. So he goes into strongman and he's strong enough to pick up 800-pound yoke, sure. Is he strong enough to run with it or move with it? No, but he's going to try because, well, the ego's in the way. You obviously can squat 900 pounds, so why can't you run with a 800 yoke? So he'll attempt it and then potentially beat himself up, get annoyed by it, or keep trying to do the same thing because he thinks that's what he has to do. But it is an entirely new movement, entirely new sport that he has to approach, exactly as you said, with adaptation. Pick up a 200-pound yoke, 300, whatever. Work that in for a few weeks, work that in for a few months. Work up to that build. You can't just jump into an entirely new sport and expect to perform the same exact way.
Load is just part of the adaptation. So to play into what you're saying, if people think it's the adaptation that they're actually training for, then to answer your question 100%, you can split up with those variants, the ability to stack the adaptation a little bit more progressively than you would otherwise. Because in a way you're adding the higher degree of workload, but you're able to recover from it because the stimulus has changed to be able to allow for that.
I mean, I'd say to piggyback on your point, I think everyone should do. I mean, really, strongman is primarily, most of them are already deadlifting, but they're not overhead pressing and they're not doing carries. That's the main thing they're going to get out of them. They should be overhead pressing, like use it or lose it type thing. For the loaded carries, the problem I find with the carry over there when people include them, and they are fantastic, is they treat them like a competitive strongman treats them, which if they're a gen pop, just want to be stronger, a jack, is different. So like if you want to move a max yoke as fast as possible over 20 or 10 meters, that's not going to be how you would train someone, I presume, to carry a yoke for maximal, should we say, postural strength or breathing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So
yes.
when you're carrying a whatever pound yoke for time, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're almost essentially like falling forward and catching yourself repeatedly.
You're trying to slide it and move forward with it and catch it as it's falling as fast as possible.
So people will
Yeah.
look at that and the sandbag carries and like how those are performed by people like yourself doing it at a very high level and be like, cool, that's how I do a carry. Whereas like if we're looking for shoulder health, shoulder stability, or a sandbag carry for upper back strength, that isn't how they have to do them, and then that also leads to the overloading of them and so on and so forth. So I think a big part for the loaded carries especially is that everyone should probably be doing them, but they should be looking at them through the lens of like, a loaded carry is about how do you maintain your posture or your brace, whatever you want to call it, against a load that's being held in on your back or in front of you or in your hand or whatever, as opposed to like, oh, I can carry these dumbbells the length of the gym now. Cool. Like, how many suitcase carries have we seen where the person is like 2 degrees away from falling over? Like, that's not a suitcase carry anymore.
Yeah, no, a prime example of that, especially with the carry. If I take a sandbag, my goal in a competition is to move the sandbag over from here to there as fast as possible, regardless of the weight. I'm going to pick it up whichever way I can pick it up, and I'm going to get it there as fast as I can and drop it, fall with it, whatever. For a person jump up training, it is the time under load that you care about to get stronger. Don't run with it. Walk with it. Fast-paced walk, whatever it is. But there's no reason for you to be running with it unless you plan to compete in that. So yeah, spend the time, walk with it, spend a longer time trying to move this sandbag.
I just got the cue. We're done. We're out.
We're done.
So
Awesome.
Thank you guys for listening. Head over to elitefts.com, discount code Table Talk. And thank you, Tom. Thank you, Ilya.
Yeah,
thank
We'll
you.
do it
You
again.
guys.
These are great.
Awesome. Whew. Cool. It got warm.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.